And a good Thursday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, and X, available 24/7 via our podcast. Just head on over to nickcraig.com or search for the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. We've got a busy Thursday morning coming up for you here on the program as we celebrate 1 week into this venture of breaking away from the corporate media and promoting and talking about some of the issues affecting not only southeastern North Carolina, but the state as a whole. And, of course, a lot of focus on things going on federally. You have to excuse my voice this morning, dealing with something, the flu or some sort of cold. So if I sound a little hoarse, apologies on that. But we're on the upswing of everything going on there. So a very interesting story I caught yesterday over at carolinajournal.com. Katie Zender's got the story. And the headline of the story is this: suit, meaning legal suit, alleges hurricane relief funds distributed based on racial equity. Now, we spent a lot of time on yesterday's show talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and how this has taken over vast swaths of our public and private sectors. Education, private business, state, local, federal governments. It is permeating seemingly every facet of our life. And we heard the comments from New Hanover County Commissioner Dane Scalise about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI department in New Hanover County, the things that they are attempting to do, trying to move the county closer to sanctuary status, something that voters are not in favor of. But again, to justify your existence as a diversity, equity, and inclusion office, these are the kinds of things that you've got to do. So, jumping into this story over at carolinajournal.com, there is a Title VI complaint that has been levied against Buncombe County, which hosts the city of Asheville, which was ravaged by Hurricane Helene back in September. So this complaint that was filed with the U.S. Department of Treasury by a group known as the WNC Citizens for Equality alleges that hurricane relief funds that were set to be doled out to local businesses are being prioritized based on racial preferences rather than by need. Now, that sounds like a pretty shocking headline because it is. Now, let's be perfectly honest and clear with each other. Asheville in Buncombe County is one of the progressive hotbeds in our state. I used to refer to them as liberal hellholes. And I think Asheville and Buncombe County kind of falls into that same category, where they are so far to the left in the things that they do, in the way that they operate. So you've got now businesses that were ravaged across Buncombe County. Businesses that had 6 feet of water inside of them. And in some cases, the businesses literally wiped off the foundations that they were sitting on. Nothing left at all. And government doing what government does in this case is providing relief, which is a good thing. We wish that we had seen some more relief in regards to Hurricane Helene, where you had FEMA going out and, ignoring houses that had Trump signs or Trump flags or any sort of paraphernalia that could have been associated with, at the time, the previous president, where this happened back in September before the election. Anybody that supported the 45th president of the United States, FEMA went, maybe they're not, they could be confrontational. Things could get out of line. Things could get out of control. So we just need to make sure we ignore those individuals. That's literally what happened. It's unfortunate. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. But it's what happened. And that's a really sad sign of a really, a bad showing for the federal government. Not shocking. Not unbelievable, but very much what you would expect from the federal government. So you already had that taking place. The relief, the storm hit in late September. It's been, 4 months now, almost 4 months since the storm. People are still struggling big time out in Western North Carolina. FEMA continues to move the ball, change the deadline, change the date for hotel vouchers. It's an unmitigated freaking disaster. And now we're learning that Buncombe County has set up a grant program that is prioritizing individuals based on their skin color. So I thought this sounds pretty unrealistic, right? That this can't actually be happening. So I went and pulled the document. This is a Helene Relief Small Business Grant Program PowerPoint that is on the buncombecounty.org website from November the 19th. And I thought we could just go through it and go through some of the details on it. So here's the background. On November 1st, the Board of Commissioners approved the reallocation of ARPA, American Rescue Plan funds, for Helene relief programs. Staff put out an RFP, which is a request for proposal, to identify partners to manage the small business relief funds and noticed today's public hearing. On November the 12th, this is of course last year, staff reviewed and selected Mountain BizWorks' proposal. Competitive process, one proposal. So that's what they're saying here. So that's what went on. The request. Board of Commissioners approval for the following. A resolution authorizing $1.5 million in economic development appropriations for hurricane relief and authorization to the county manager to contract with Mountain BizWorks to administer the program. So far, no issues. They're taking some federal dollars and they are expending them for the incredibly horrific and awful situation that's unfolding out west. So the current need. In the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, hundreds of businesses have experienced economic injury and interruptions to operations, impacting the local workforce. While programs may exist to support business and workforce impact, many of the businesses impacted by Helene are still recovering from COVID-19 and will not be able to sustain operations without grants. Seems plausible. I don't think a large number of businesses fall into this category, but are there a few? Could there be a couple? Absolutely. Absolutely. So they go through the impact on business. An estimated $92 million estimated in uninsured economic loss to small businesses in Buncombe County based on applications to Mountain BizWorks so far, the nonprofit group that they partnered with to conduct and to dole out this money. Local independent restaurants are seeing 60 to 70% less revenue compared to this time last year. This is in mid-November, which makes sense. There was not a lot of tourism going on in Western North Carolina immediately after Helene. But not only was it dangerous, but many folks did not feel it was appropriate to travel with all of the devastation and destruction. Buncombe County in their PowerPoint here says it estimates 10 to 12,000 unemployment fillings with more details to come. Okay, so we've gone through these first couple of slides here. Everything seems pretty realistic, pretty above board. Now we get into the small business support model. This is where things start running out of control. The eligibility. Are small businesses impacted by Hurricane Helene with less than 25 employees? So really honing in on small business. The ability to demonstrate retention or rehiring of employees. The ability to retain employees for 6 months from grant award, and all industries eligible to supply, no specific focus on the grant. That's pretty realistic eligibility. Super small business, less than 25 employees. You got to be able to keep these individuals on the payroll. You got to keep your business open and operational. We don't want to just give you this money to then have you close immediately after you've expended through it. You have to have a plan to stay open, a plan to operate. All fine. Our next bullet point says focus areas. Focus areas. BIPOC owned businesses or BIPOC businesses. Now, for individuals that are not familiar with these sorts of acronyms, and unfortunately, many of these acronyms, again, all flow through these diversity, equity, and inclusion departments. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. That's what BIPOC stands for. So their focus area in Buncombe County on relief from the most devastating hurricane that this area of the state, in some cases, has ever seen. In other cases, the worst storm that they've seen since the early 1900s, over a century. They are focusing their relief efforts on Black and Indigenous, as well as people of color owned businesses, woman owned businesses, and sole proprietorships. Meaning that if you are a white male, or in this case, a white male that owns a business in Buncombe County or in the city of Asheville with less than 25 employees and you meet the other eligibility requirements, you are not a focus. You're not a focus. And that's not my opinion on this. This is not me reading through the lines or trying to gin up some sort of controversy. No, this is exactly what their document says. Their focus area should be all businesses in Buncombe County, all businesses within the city of Asheville. Yet, because they are so far to the left over in Buncombe County, they are so steeped in their liberal progressive ideology, their focus area to get small businesses back up and running are Black and Indigenous, people of color, and women. So if you're a white guy that owns a business in Buncombe County, to hell with you. You're not our focus area. So that takes us back to this lawsuit that is filed by the Western North Carolina Citizens for Equality. Dr. Carl Mumpower is the president of that group, and he says this in a statement to CarolinaJournal.com. I'm confident that the Treasury Department will take steps to bring Buncombe County into compliance with anti-discrimination laws. Our citizens deserve to be treated equally, regardless of race, and I am optimistic that Buncombe County's administration will agree to do the right thing and stop judging its citizens by skin color. Imagine that. Imagine that you have to file a Title VI complaint with the Treasury Department, federally, of course, that's where the Treasury Department is. You have to file a Title VI complaint with them because your county, one of the largest counties in the western half of the state, I'll note, your county is explicitly discriminating against people in regards to grants for hurricane relief. Sounds like something that you would read over at like Babylon Bee or something of that nature, right? A fake, one of those fake headline websites. Because you could write the headline: white-owned businesses get no help in Buncombe County. White businesses get no help in Asheville, right? That would be the joke headline that would come forward. Yet, it's not a joke. Yet, it's not something that is being extrapolated from a document. They are very clearly saying what their focus areas are. The Buncombe County government is explicitly discriminating against, in this case, white-owned businesses by men. Because if you are a white woman, one of their focus areas is women-owned businesses, so you're covered. But if you're a white male that operates or owns a business anywhere in Buncombe County, this grant, this hurricane relief is no good for you. You don't fit the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and procedures of Buncombe County. So you're unable to get your business back up and running. You're, of course, dealing with the hardships associated. Well, to hell with you, because you're a white guy. And you don't fit one of our focus areas, which is BIPOC-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and sole proprietorships. If you don't fit one of those, you're not in the focus area, and you'll fall all the way down to the bottom of the list in terms of relief. And folks, they're not hiding it. This is not some sort of secret document that was leaked. This is a PowerPoint presentation that was uploaded to their website. This was gone through in public. This is not some sort of public records request to find emails exchanged back and forth. This is right out in the open. And this is what sort of crazy liberal policies, this is what they look like in practicality. When you look at liberalism and the woke agenda that is pushed by the left, this is how it manifests itself. This is the end result of these far left progressive policies. You've got individuals in Buncombe County that think it's a good idea to put forward a document like this and to say, hey, here's our grant program, but only if you're a certain skin color. We want to help you we want to help you with relief from Hurricane Helene, but only if you are a woman or you have a certain skin color. Is that really the role and the place of government? Doesn't sound like it to me. Not only is it not the role of government, it's illegal. These are federal dollars that Buncombe County is reallocating from ARPA to help individuals with hurricane relief. So, again, not secret, not hidden, right out in the public. Going back to a quote here from this Western North Carolina group that is bringing forth this Title VI complaint, looking at the ahead of that, he says, quote, people have already been devastated by Helene. To have the county then tell storm victims that they cannot receive equal treatment for help due to their skin color is just adding insult to injury. We should be coming together as a community, but Buncombe County leaders feel it is more important to divide us by race. It's appalling that they took this opportunity at this point when people are so desperate for help to make the color of a person's skin a priority in deciding who receives help. Buncombe County leaders should be ashamed of themselves. Now, in the article over at CarolinaJournal.com, Katie Zender spoke with a civil rights attorney, Ruth Smith, and she had to say this, quote, the county's actions are a clear violation of Title VI, which forbids entities from using federal funds in any manner that discriminate based on race. The penalty here could be stiff. Buncombe County could be required to reimburse to the federal government the entirety of its nearly $1.6 million that it's reallocating. And that's at a time when the county is broke. Currently in Buncombe County, they are projecting a $20 million budget shortfall. And as a result of that, they are already cutting services and staffing. This is a direct quote from a civil rights attorney in Asheville. Quote, it's beyond stupid to risk what money they do have to push an illegal discrimination agenda. Yeah, I would have to argue, I'd have to agree there with civil rights attorney Ruth Smith. It is beyond stupid. But again, this is how the woke ideology manifests. This is how the culture that is supported and promoted by the left. This is the practical, I don't even know what you'd say. This is the practical application of it. Where we hear and we see all of the ridiculously stupid things that the left says. That's not anything new. You have become accustomed to hearing nonsense and ridiculous conjecture from the left. But what you have here is this stuff manifest in real time. This is the application of the crazy, out-of-control things that are promoted by the political ideology from Democrats in places like Asheville. However, this is not the first time that Buncombe County has had some issues. Listen to this. Last year, the Buncombe County schools, also controlled and handled by the government, offered an internship program for high school seniors, which allowed students to spend a semester at a local health institute. No issue there. Participants received full academic credit, including honors credit, while working alongside nurses and doctors to explore careers in healthcare. No issue there either. Sounds great. Talk about, one of the concerns and one of the criticisms of education right now is that there's not a lot of real-world application. That a lot of the things that are taught, they're not really practical for real life. This sounds great. Giving high school seniors the opportunity to spend time inside of a local health institute, phenomenal. However, the program initially excluded white and Asian students from participating. Happens. It is what it is. If you're a white student or an Asian student, to hell with you. Again, same thing. There's an article over at carolinajournal.com. This is January 25th of last year. So literally almost to the day of the story we're talking about in Buncombe County this morning, you had this situation in Asheville. Or in Buncombe County as well, within the Asheville school system. So if you were a white student or an Asian student, you were not eligible for the program. Now, this was called out by this same group that we're talking about this morning, this WNC Citizens for Equality group, called it out. Their letter dated January the 22nd, 2024, dealing with this story. So I guess they didn't learn their lessons over in Buncombe County. Their inability to not discriminate against individuals based on their race is obviously something that they can't overcome. That's pretty sad. That's pretty pathetic. Yet, as I always like to remind you, this comes from the same individuals, the people that push these kinds of things, discriminating against white and Asian students in a internship program. These individuals that are pushing a relief program for Western North Carolina in Buncombe County that discriminates against white men. These are the same individuals that are all in favor of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They will yell it, in the case of Western North Carolina, they will yell it from the mountaintops about how much they love DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. We don't discriminate. We want everybody to be treated equally. Systemic racism this, systemic racism that, ad nauseum, foaming at the mouth over DEI and treating people equally and fairly. Yet when they get the opportunity to treat people equally and fairly, what do? The proof is in the pudding here. They actively are discriminating against people based on their skin color. They are actively discriminating against people based on their race. These are real world examples of what this sort of woke ideology leads to. Now, one of Trump's executive orders, I talked about this on Tuesday, one of Trump's executive orders is ending all discriminatory programs under diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because that needs to be done. This is an example of what DEI leads to. This is the picture-perfect example of how disastrous and racist these programs are. You have a county government using taxpayer dollars from the federal government to actively discriminate against white men in Buncombe County. No reading between the lines. No tea leaves needing to be looked at here to try and put this together. They are saying it flat out for the public to read and understand. And now they're being sued. That's what this Title IX suit, or this Title VI suit, rather, is. That's why it's come forward. It's interesting to note here at the end of the article, it says Buncombe County's legal department and the chair of the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners did not respond to Carolina Journal's request for comment. Oh, really? I'm shocked. They didn't have anything to put on the record about this? They didn't have anything to say? No useful things to express? Because you can't justify this. See, they put this stuff out in public. This is obviously what they're in favor of. They have a track record of doing it over in Buncombe County. But yet when they get called on it, when somebody goes, hey, wait, hold on, wait a second. What you're doing here is not only not diverse and does not fit diversity, equity, and inclusion at all, but in this case, it's federally illegal. Well, then they have no comment. See, because they think they can get away with this stuff until it's called out. And in the past, that's exactly what happened. Listen to this. For that story we just talked about with the internship program with seniors in Buncombe County, there was a Title VI complaint filed on that last year by this same group. However, the Biden administration decided not to act on it. So here you go. You've got Title VI. This is something that was going on within the school system, which receives federal dollars. The Title VI complaint was filed, and the Biden administration, again, all in favor of diversity, equity, and inclusion, said, nah, we'll pass. Well, things have changed dramatically since last year. You've got a brand new top dog in the Oval Office. His name is Donald Trump, and he has made it very clear from day one that diversity, equity, and inclusion is incredibly disastrous for our country. It's bad. First of all, it's bad for government. It's bad for private business, and it's bad for us as a society because it does nothing but pin people against each other based on their race. Pin people against each other based on their ethnic background. These are the real-life examples of that taking place. This story this morning over at CarolinaJournal.com. You've got people that are hurting so bad from Hurricane Helene, that are still struggling so much. And now they've got their government actively discriminating against them. Because, you're just a white guy. So you don't really fit a focus area. You're not really all that important. So we'll focus on other groups. If there's any money left over, yeah, we'll throw you a couple scraps. But really, you're not our focus. This is woke ideology and wokeism manifest in real life. And you can see the results and the impacts that it has. Now, President Trump is slated to be in Western North Carolina coming up tomorrow. I don't think we'll hear anything from him about this situation in Buncombe County. I'm not sure that he is necessarily familiar with it as of yet. Maybe somebody's talking to him about it. We'll talk about that coming up here. We'll also catch up with Vance Ginn. Dr. Vance Ginn, I should say. He's an economist and spent some time in the first Trump administration within the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, within the first administration. He'll join us here in a little bit to discuss the Trump economy that is looking to be ushered in and some of the relief that can be taking place for American citizens. We'll have those conversations coming up here in just a few minutes. Want to remind you that you can support the show and get bonus access, including our daily show notes, by visiting patreon.com/Nick Craig. We're getting folks signing up to that each and every day. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for supporting my efforts here and bringing you some of the news like this horrific situation out in Western North Carolina with discriminatory practices being put in place by government. It is greatly appreciated. I can't thank you enough for your support. If you're interested in supporting and getting some of that additional content, again, patreon.com/Nick Craig. We'll grab a quick break. We'll get into Trump in Western North Carolina. Plus, we'll chat with Economist Dr. Vance Ginn coming up in just a few minutes. You're listening to The Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X. And welcome back to the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Don't forget to give us a subscribe over on Rumble, or a follow, I should say. It's rumble.com/The Nick Craig Show. That's rumble.com/The Nick Craig Show as we continue our show over there this morning. So President Trump is slated to be in North Carolina. He is going to make his way out to the western half of the state tomorrow. He did his first interview last night since becoming and being sworn in as the 47th president of the United States. He sat down with Sean Hannity and discussed briefly about hurricane relief and put FEMA on watch. Take a listen to this.
FEMA is getting in the way of everything, and the Democrats actually use FEMA not to help North Carolina.
It makes no sense.
So I'm stopping on Friday. I'm stopping in North Carolina, first stop, because those people were treated very badly by Democrats. And I'm stopping there. We're going to get that thing straightened out because they're still suffering from a hurricane from months ago. And then I'm going to go to California. I'll go.
So there's Trump last night on Hannity saying that FEMA is getting in the way of everything and claiming that the Democrats actually used FEMA not to help North Carolina, putting FEMA on notice. You know, I've talked about this in the past. A lot of shakeups need to happen at the federal level. Things need to change dramatically. However, you can't just abolish FEMA. Now, here's the thing. Could you? The answer is yes. Technically, you could just, by the stroke of a pen, abolish FEMA. You could do that. However, in the meantime, that does not help the individuals that are still struggling with the hurricane in western North Carolina, hurricanes in portions of western Florida, and now wildfires out in Los Angeles. You need to have something prepared and ready to go to fill that gap. Now, Trump also alluded to the fact that long term, he might look at getting rid of FEMA and just having the states manage this relief. He mentioned the fact that you would have FEMA, which would essentially just be a pass-through for federal dollars to these local states and municipalities that are dealing with the storm. And I think long-term, that's actually a pretty good idea. I mean, you see it with groups like the Department of Education and so many of these federal programs. They suck money up from the states and then trickle it back down. However, it's significantly less money that was sent up, and the money that comes back is tied up in all this sort of bureaucratical red tape. That's how groups like the Department of Education continue to exist, which I think Trump probably will abolish very soon. Linda McMahon, who used to head up SBA under the previous Trump administration, is now the head of the Department of Education. I'm all in favor of Trump axing the federal education department. There's no need for it. It's not providing anything useful. It's just wasting taxpayer dollars that could easily be spent actually educating children. And it's unfortunately the tale of the federal government. So often, so many things that they deal with, like hurricane relief, they fail. They miserably fail at dealing with these issues. And it's incredibly frustrating because you have folks that are really hurting, folks that really need this kind of relief. And it's unfortunate that the help is not there, but it's not. You've got FEMA who was actively ignoring individuals that had any sort of Trump paraphernalia in their homes. Tell me how that's good. Tell me how that is helping individuals in western North Carolina. It's not. So Trump will be in the state tomorrow. That will happen after our show. We might jump back live on probably just a live stream over on X. If he ends up doing a longer press conference, I'll keep an eye on that. Might jump on for that on our X and Rumble. Won't be streaming that stuff on YouTube. They tend to be pretty quick with the copyright strikes depending on the content. So make sure you're following the X and Rumble accounts for that. Maybe we'll see. kind of what Trump has to say tomorrow, how quick he's in and out, and then he'll make his way to portions of Southern California, where not only are they dealing with the impacts of those wildfires, but literally new fires are starting up this morning. It's a real mess out in in certain portions of Southern California. So that's what we're tracking on FEMA. We'll see. I'm sure we'll get some additional comments from Trump tomorrow. We'll have those. I'll post them up on my X account. We'll talk about them coming up Monday morning right here on the Nick Craig Show. Don't forget to follow me on X to keep up to date with news throughout the day. If you are a user of X, formerly Twitter, it's x.com/Nicholas M. Craig, at Nicholas M. Craig on X. President Trump has been in the Oval Office just a couple of days, and obviously one of the major reasons he was so successful in the November election was the status of the economy. To get some more details on that this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome Vance Ginn to the Nick Craig Show this morning. Vance, you spent some time in the first Trump administration, the OMB, Office of Management and Budget. Give us your overall view of the Trump economy that he and his new transition, or what was his transition team, now his actual staff, that they're trying to usher into for the American people.
Yeah, Nick, it's a pleasure to be with you. And look, I mean, what he's coming into is some things that look good on the surface, but there's a lot of underlying problems. The biggest one, to me anyway, is the national debt. We have an overspending problem. We've got $36 trillion in national debt, an expected $20 trillion added over the next 10 years. So $2 trillion per year in a period of wartime. It's just unheard of. And GDP, if you look at debt to GDP, it's 130% of GDP, right? So this is a massive amount of debt that's out there. But you also have a labor force participation rate that is going down, meaning fewer people are wanting to work. And that's been a problem during the entire Biden administration. And they've been handing out more money to people to stay home relative to going to work. And so there comes into a lot of problems. But one of the things I've seen so far, Nick, is that the Trump administration is already putting out EOs to get federal employees back to work, to get other things started again and deregulate the economy. And I think that will really do a great deal of service, just like it did in the first administration of the Trump administration, to allow for more prosperity and growth.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up that executive order. We'd seen a lot of this in the private sector over, let's call it the last 12 months or so. A lot of major institutions saying, all right, guys, you've been home for like 4 years now. It's time to head back into the office. We're now seeing that at the federal level, and presumably that's going to be a huge increase in productivity for the federal government.
Well, one would hope, and maybe, just maybe, Nick, there'll be some people who say, you know what, I don't want to go back to the office, and then they'll quit. So there's one thing that's been out there on the surface is the Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE, that's been led by Elon Musk, where they're looking at creating government efficiencies, reducing government spending, deregulating things. And I think this could be one way to get attrition to say, you know what, maybe some of these federal employees just won't come back. And then that will help to reduce the size of the federal government, which is about 2.2 million workers across, the federal government. It's a massive number of people. That there should be fewer people. That way we can get increases in productivity, as you pointed out, and maybe even do more with AI within federal government and let go of some of these federal employees that we can reduce government spending in the process.
Well, and that's always kind of what you're looking at here when you compare and contrast the private to the public sector. When small business, Vance, is under a tight constraint, maybe they have to let people go, they have to adjust people's schedules. The federal government typically doesn't do that unless you've got a government shutdown like we saw for a couple of days in the latter parts of last year. It's really not something that they worry about. And in your mind, does that have a major economic impact?
I think it could. I mean, for one thing, every government employee means dollars coming out of the productive private sector, because the government has no money. It has to come from us. At the same time, they're also there to continue their job. And a lot of times that incentivizes them to expand government, to regulate more, so that way they have more to do, more things to push around throughout government. And that means a harder job of small business owners and families to put food on the table, hire new workers, and expand their business. That's really where we want the money to be, is in the productive private sector, not in government. So this could be a big step heading in the right direction if we can reduce the number of federal employees.
We're joined this morning by Economist Dr. Vance Ginn on the Nick Craig Show. Vance, when you used to join me on the radio, one of the things that we used to talk about all the time was interest rates. If individuals are in a situation where they have to buy a new car, maybe they need to upsize their house, they're growing their family, the interest rates that are being set by the Federal Reserve has a major impact. They're putting things on credit cards. Where do you see the role of the Federal Reserve in all of this? Is Jerome Powell staying there? What exactly are you seeing in regards to that?
Well, the Federal Reserve has been a travesty. You and I talked about this. It's been a disaster and created the inflationary pressure that we had during the Biden administration, although that was also fueled by the excessive government spending by Biden and Congress. Maybe we can get that under control by Trump. But then at the same time, the Federal Reserve, I mean, we need less discretion by the Fed. We need to, if we're going to have a Federal Reserve, which I would prefer us not to have a central bank that's manipulating the economy and everything else, we should have rules that are in place that removes the discretion and says, you know what, you're going to act like almost like a computer, if you will, instead of having these top-down government regulator people creating money and setting interest rates across the economy. That's not how a free market capitalist system is supposed to work. That's a top-down socialist sort of system. And so Jerome Powell, his term doesn't expire until midway of 2006. I think it's May of 2026. I think it's about May of 2026, somewhere right around there. My guess is that Trump won't replace him between now and then, but he will put out a lot of information to say, you know what, Jerome Powell, stop doing a disservice to Americans through your bad policies and let us in Congress deregulate, have more tax cuts, and get the spending under control. I think that's really the way to strengthen the economy instead of having so much strength and power coming out of the Federal Reserve.
You know, you brought up about potentially ending the Federal Reserve. Every once in a while, Vance, you'll catch a bumper sticker, some guys driving around in a red pickup truck and says, end the Fed on it. Is that something practically that you think not at just Trump himself, obviously the people very close around him, is that something that you think they'll likely push for? Where would you place the odds on that?
I think it's probably pretty low that they'll push for that because they've got a lot of other things that they're going to be pushing. But there is a lot of skepticism by the president and others in his administration that I think will head us more in that direction. Maybe it starts with auditing the Fed. Senator Rand Paul has been big on that for a number of years. Ron Paul, a lot of the folks that have been out there, Thomas Massey, I think auditing the Fed would be a good step in the right direction. And then Congress could also reduce their mandate. They've got a dual mandate at the Federal Reserve set by Congress, right, of making sure we have full employment and price stability. Well, the Fed doesn't control employment. So we need to get rid of that one entirely and have them focus just on price stability because they control the number of dollars that are going in circulation. And if we can do that, we could be in a much better position what the Federal Reserve is going to do. Because, when they were first created in 1913, so we didn't have a central bank before then, it was basically supposed to be a lender of last resort. And too often, Nick, has become the lender of first resort in bailing out folks and everything else. And that shouldn't be the role of the government at all, especially a central bank.
Vance, one of the things that you used to walk us through and really introduce to a lot of the audience here in southeastern North Carolina was the Fed's balance sheet, which exploded and ballooned during COVID and when all of that free money, as it was known, was flying around the economy. What's the status of that look like today? And are we seeing any shifts one way or the other from the Fed chairman and Jerome Powell?
Yeah, I've been trying to hit this drum, and you've helped me out with this so much, is that we've got to look at the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. It's not just the interest rates. Those are indicators, but they're indirect effect of the direct effect from the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. That's how much assets they control. They buy a lot of government debt. They buy mortgage-backed securities and other assets that inflates those prices and distorts the overall economy. So the Federal Reserve's balance sheet went from about $4 trillion before the pandemic to $9 trillion. It is down to $7 trillion, but it's still 75% higher than what it was before the pandemic. And you go back before the great financial crisis in 2008, it was only $800 billion. So I would suggest that there's way too much money circulating across the economy. We've got a lot of asset bubbles, whether it be the stock market, the bond market, housing. A lot of these things I think are going to deflate, even as the Trump administration is going to try to drive more economic growth and incentivize that with tax cuts and deregulation. You could see some of these asset prices start to burst, which will help families buy stocks at a lower price, help their houses not pay so much in property taxes, but there will be some adjustments that happen along the way. And one thing, Nick, that I've really been working on here recently is that what if we had a percentage of GDP for the Federal Reserve's balance sheet? So when it was $800 billion, it was 6% of GDP. Now is at 25% of GDP, four times greater. So what if it just went back to 6%? That would be a $1.5 trillion balance sheet. I think that could be better, more in line with our $27 trillion economy, even though I'd like to end it at the end of the day. But that would put us in a better position than what we're in now.
Vance, you dive into these topics, and some of them are rather complex. It's why you spent some time in the previous administration. It's why you cover this stuff. You've got a Substack and a podcast called Let the People Prosper. Tell us a little bit about that and how folks can get connected there.
Yeah, Nick, it's always a pleasure to be with you. And yes, go to vanceginn.com. You can find out all my information there. But I do have a Substack, vanceginn.substack.com. And my podcast is Let People Prosper. It's on all the major podcast platforms that are out there. Be sure to check that out. They come out every week. A lot of good discussions like the ones we're having here, and along with some other experts that I bring on the program. So yes, please go and check that out, vanceginn.com.
Vance, thanks for joining me this morning on the Nick Craig Show.
Hey, thanks so much. Have a great day.
I love our chats with Vance. He became a regular on the radio show, and the way that he walks through these very complex financial issues. Right? Let's be honest and clear about this. The economy is not a simple beast to deal with. It's something that is rather complex. It's something that when you look at, in the case of what Trump is faced with now, it's not something that you wave a magic wand or sign an executive order to fix. This is a long-term problem that the United States continues to face. Out of control spending, a Federal Reserve with their interest rates that make it incredibly challenging for small businesses to borrow money, for individuals to get home and personal loans because of the high interest rates. These are very complex issues that we face and that we deal with. And Vance just does just such a phenomenal job walking through that stuff. Definitely give him a follow over on X if you're a user there. If not, subscribe to his Substack and check out his podcast. He deep dives through this stuff. He's actually got a new one out this morning talking about some of these issues. So really appreciate Vance's time and glad to have him on board here as we trek down this road of the Nick Craig Show and talk about the important issues of the day. So that's going to do it for us this morning. I am my voice, as you can hear, is incredibly hoarse, dealing with a little bit of a little cold or something. So we'll cut it a little bit short this morning. I want to remind you, if you want exclusive access to the show, including daily show notes and more, head on over to patreon.com/Nick Craig. We'll be doing our first monthly live stream / hangout next week. If you're a user of the Patreon platform, keep an eye out for the post on that. We'll jump into kind of a Google meeting, and we'll talk about politics and kind of have a little roundtable discussion on it. So that is one of the perks and benefits of financially supporting the show over on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Nick Craig. Well, another day done. Trump will continue his wrath in the Oval Office as he heads into his now third full day in the Oval Office as the president. We're expecting some new news from him today. We'll track that. He will be making his way out to Western North Carolina tomorrow as well. So we'll be covering those details as we get to them here on the program. That's going to do it for a Thursday morning. Thank you so much for checking us out live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X. And if not, listening to the podcast over at nickcraig.com. That's going to do it for a Thursday edition of the Nick Craig Show. We're back tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.